Making our nation's food supply more resilient in a changing world. I'm Tisha Powell.
And I'm Lee Zurich. Farmers are often on the front lines of shifting weather patterns and extreme temperatures that threaten harvests. It's why scientists are searching for ways to help crops survive.
Between 2023 and 2024, Earth experienced a 13-month streak of record-breaking heat, and that can devastate a harvest in more ways than one.
Reporter Heather Graff explains how decades worth of work to create an adapted apple could sow the seeds for more climate-resilient crops.
This probably started coming down 3 or 4 years ago.
It may not look like it at first glance, but this orchard is actually a research facility.
I think everyone wants crispness.
The place where Chris Walsh has spent more than 3 decades working to build a better apple.
We started out breeding for hot weather in 1991.
He's a professor emeritus in the Plant Science and Landscape Architecture department at the University of Maryland. And initially, Walsh wanted to develop an apple that could thrive in this particular region.
We were trying to get heat tolerance for Appalachia.
Yet over time, he realized that concept could potentially help growers in many places.
We're dealing with climate change, warmer, wetter, windier, and we sort of took on all 3 of those things as potential problems for growers.
He says it took years of careful crossbreeding and selection, but in 2023, Walsh and his team secured patents for 2 new apple varieties.
So these are TAP 2.
One yellow, one red, and both intended to be more climate resilient.
So it's taken almost a human generation to go from an apple seedling that would come off a tree to actually being of the quality and all the attributes you're looking for.
Those attributes include not just heat tolerance, but blight tolerance as well, because he says bacterial diseases like fire blight have also become more common amid warmer temperatures.
This is fire blight.
Walsh showing us where it's shown up on other trees in the university's test orchard, while his varieties remain blight-free.
So you didn't see any fire blight over here.
And finally, he says these new apples were designed to grow into much shorter trees.
We liked the fact that they come down and they're bendable.
Walsh hopes that special architecture will make them easier to harvest, as the industry also copes with ongoing labor shortages. The National Trade Association representing apple growers warned in its 2024 Outlook report that domestic agricultural labor is getting harder and harder to find.
Every apple in the U.S. is harvested by hand, and that's a lot of hours.
We sat down with U.S. Apple's Vice President of Insight and Analytics, Chris Gerlach, to talk about some of the biggest challenges facing apple growers today, from the cost and availability of labor to climate change and its effects on one of America's most consumed fruits.
2021, there was what was called the heat dome in the Pacific Northwest. Temperatures in the orchard reaching 120, 30 degrees on the surface of an apple really impacted the quality of that year's crop, brought it down about 10% for that year. Also, the pests and diseases that are coming along with those warmer temperatures.
This, as the U.S. is currently the 3rd largest apple producer worldwide, with the industry's economic impact estimated at about $23 billion each year. Gerlach says that's why work being done at the University of Maryland and other research programs is so important moving forward.
I personally write letters of recommendation for research grants every year, and the last 3 years running I've written one for climate change, developing apples that are going to be a long-term better solution for these growers.
Growers.
When you turn an apple and it's got kind of a creamy color to it.
Like Wade Butler.
When they're ready, they're ready.
Who runs a family farm and pick your own orchard not far from where Walsh has developed those 2 new apple varieties in Maryland. Does that intrigue you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We're definitely watching what he's doing.
Butler has to pay attention because this is his livelihood.
Gosh, we've had the earliest seasons ever the last couple of years, it seems like. You can lose the whole crop on one cold night in April. Temperature fluctuations. Then there's the heat in the summer to deal with. If it gets too hot, fire blight can be devastating.
He says all of it underscores the threat posed by climate change.
I think part of what apple growers like myself, our job is to keep directing universities to our needs. University researchers can tap into that and give us a better product to grow.
For For Walsh, that has always been the goal.
And you just have to keep working at it.
And though it's not yet clear exactly when these heat-resistant apples will be widely available, Walsh says he's already getting interest from around the country and the world.
We've gotten calls from Italy, South Africa. We also have trials in Michigan and Texas.
What does that interest say to you?
Well, I think everyone's fighting heat.
Do you think climate change will continue to force this industry to have to adapt?
I think it will, and I think it will happen faster. The reality is the heat and the unpredictable weather seem to be getting worse on a yearly basis.
A Texas A&M professor who is conducting trials on these new apple varieties told us he wants to see how they fare in the heat of Texas. But he also hopes this type of climate resilience can be replicated for other crops.
Climate resilience has become the key word because it's not one or the other, it's all of the above. We want to create this crop that can resist diseases, but also if it's too cold or too hot, it can still survive.
For now, in Maryland, Chris Walsh says we can expect to see the new apple varieties at a few pick-your-own orchards within the next year. And then eventually they'd be licensed through commercial nurseries, get an official name, and could be sold directly to growers.